welcome everybody to this episode of Woman Fully Alive. And I'm your host, Madeleine, and I am so excited to dive into this conversation today with Meg Dennison. Now, I met Meg probably going on 7, 8 years ago, where I actually reached out to her around leadership, around empowerment, around direction. And I still remember some of those really key moments. So, welcome, Meg, to the podcast.
Oh, Madeline, thank you for having me. It's so great to see you.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. So, Meg Dennison she's taught conscious leadership practices for quite a long time now. And what I love is that she helps women to own their authority and step into their ambition. And I know for some of our listeners, there's, some part of us that gets scared when we hear that. But through her teachings and through her stories, she's radically transformed her own life through her marriage, through a move across the country. And so, this idea of reimagining what your life could be. So if you're here and you have a yearning for something more, something different, sometimes when we unpack that, it's not exactly what we thought it was. So, Meg, I want to just really welcome you, and I can't wait to hear what you're up to, and just give us an idea, maybe as we get going, of how you ended up here teaching conscious leadership to women and girls.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that we worked together and we met when I was really kind of at the beginning of that, when I was moving across the country, and I was literally at a point, I was on the East Coast, outside of Boston, and literally the car was packed. And I'd already kind of like blown up my life in other ways by selling my house right after my daughter graduated from college and starting a new career, and my husband starting a new career. And we were just at that point, this inflection point. It was like in life where we really wanted to do something different. And there was a moment where we could, and we did. But moving across the country and really starting this new career has helped me really understand what it means to have that gap between like where you are and what your ambition is. And ambition is often thought of like it's got a little bit of a, I don't want to say it's a dirty word, but
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it has a, ambition is what you want, going for what you want. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
has a little bit of selfishness to it. But I actually think women could be a little more selfish sometimes, especially after you've been raising a family, and basically doing what everyone else wants you to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That word ambition, it kind of brings up drive and competition and like stepping on other people's heads and like
Yeah,
that part of us that's being like deadened or buried. And it's
yeah.
not that you're talking about.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I'm sure it is for some
Mm,
people, but it does not
mm,
have to be. And I think that one of the things that I have learned is uh, in helping women meet their ambition and close those. Specifically, I help women uh, who have the skills, who like know what they do, and but they know that they need more. And most of the time, those skills are skills of improving their self-awareness and understanding themselves better so that they can have better relationships at work.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about impact, like, because I imagine like closing that gap. Like there's a lot of fears and conditioning that comes up in there around like um, being seen and can I really do this? And like to get to impact. Did that come up? That must have come up for you
Yeah,
in
well,
this
it's
journey.
interesting because that impact, and again, I say this, like, you, if you want to have impact, like, I feel like raising a family has impact, right? And then
Big
there's
impact.
also something else that you may want to do after that. Like me, I have three kids and I raised three kids, and when I was in it, I felt like I wanted to be out of it in some ways. It wasn't enough, and I spent a lot of time doing volunteer work and that kind of thing, getting all kinds of other skills too. But but when I think of impact and authority, like, that is something, and I think what you were also getting at was wondering if you can do something, and we can name that as imposter syndrome. I don't like to
Hmm.
talk about imposter
Okay.
syndrome too much.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to pathologize it because it's just like, oh yeah, you're doing something new. It feels uncomfortable, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Because often we'll say, "Oh, that's imposter syndrome," and then we never unpack it really. Like, "Oh, that's." I've heard that many, many times, and I don't actually use that term myself either, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, because I don't want it to be too much of a label for people. And it
Yeah.
still is true that when you are stretching, when you are getting out of your comfort zone, you feel uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
uh, there's a way that you know, you can bring yourself back. You can have, you know, an inner critic telling you things in your mind that make you smaller. Um,
Yeah.
but the whole idea of ambition, and I've been calling it that because I feel like there's an energy of wanting, for women and for myself, wanting something bigger, wanting to have a bigger impact, and
Yeah. Yeah.
not really allowing that.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a yearning I find behind that, that you're here, you've done many things, and you've raised a family, and you've
Right.
done, what the world had told you was right, and some of it felt really good and right. But
Yeah.
then like this yearning at midlife that I'm meant for more than this. There's something that I want to, like that I want to leave behind, whether it's like some legacy or something's waiting to come out of me.
Yes, I like
Yeah.
that. Something waiting to come out, something waiting to come out. And I think some of that is wisdom. And
Mm,
you know, there are like new ideas, and because it's hard work to raise a family. It's
hmm. The
and to,
hardest. Yeah.
yeah. Uh
Yeah.
and so that longing of things, you know, whatever it is, whether it's an expression of art, or
Yeah.
whether it's something with a social impact, you know, whatever it is. For me, it is helping other women at this point. And I realized also that I have done that my whole life. And
Right. Like
this is
there's a
just
thread
a
there.
different
Yeah.
iteration. There's a thread there, right? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what would you say to someone, like if a woman said like, oh, like said to you, like, this is my life. And then, and I often find women will think that what they really want is crazy. Like that word, this is going to sound crazy, but, or like there's a yearning for
Yeah.
something. And it sounds like for you, like just that spontaneity of like driving across the country and selling your house. And like, if you had thought about that a month before, you might have thought, oh, that sounds crazy.
Okay, well, it gets even better. Okay, so I made this decision. And I'll just back up a little bit. We made this decision in January over the holidays that we were going to do something different in June when my daughter graduated from college. So we actually sold our house in January, told them they couldn't come and they couldn't have it until June. Then we moved to Vermont for 2 years, and then we crossed the country. And in Omaha, Nebraska, while we're crossing the country, I bought a ticket to Bali for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And
Why not?
well, my husband had been invited to go and do something there, and I was like, well, I might as well go. And so then we went to Bali for 2 weeks, and then when we came back, that's when we looked for to rent a house in Santa Cruz, which is where I have lived since. But those were, yes, if
Okay.
you had told me that, I mean, even when I bought that ticket to Bali, I bought it for the wrong day because I didn't really realize it was a whole day. I didn't really
Right.
realize it was 17 hours difference. So anyway, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But
but
it
I
sounds like,
no,
yeah.
I couldn't have planned all those things.
No, no. And sometimes they just come up. Like I feel like I'm a bit of that right now. I'm just leaving for a month of house sitting in France. And it's a heart's desire. I don't know what's there for me, something. But
Yeah,
that you follow that tiny little thread to where you
yeah,
are now.
yeah. So I think that one of the things is when in midlife that comes up with my clients, it was true for me. And in some ways, even though I feel like I've been on this midlife journey, because I'm 63 now. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I don't know where midlife is, 40 to
Mm.
60, something like that. Um, but I feel like I've got a lot of practice here. Okay. So
Yeah. A lot of
but
wisdom.
knowing what you want is incredibly important. And I think most women, many women, cannot answer that in the
No, I
longer
agree.
term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and when you're talking about going on a trip to, this heart's desire to go and spend a month in France, and you don't know what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen there, but
Mm-hmm.
something you're open. So, and
Yeah.
following those breadcrumbs. And so the knowing what you want
Yeah.
can come from following the breadcrumbs.
Right. Just taking the step to go to show up in
Right.
Omaha, Nebraska, and then a new idea comes in.
Right, right.
But
Yeah,
taking that tracking that first step.
yeah. And I think that also your clarity around this doesn't come from sitting around thinking about it. Your clarity comes from engagement. It comes from those steps. And that happens, whether you're thinking about your next steps in your life or whether
Mhm.
you're working on your leadership skills.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're like I was with I teach the Enneagram and I use the Enneagram as a personality assessment. And I was teaching it to a team this week. And uh, one of the things that was happening was that they're wanting to think about all of these things. And I'm like, no, you got to try it on. Try it on,
Yeah.
try it out, see what works, see what resonates with you. And then by the end of this 6 weeks that we work together, you're going to have a toolkit, but you're going to practice
Hmm.
these things. And I think that's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
same as you're figuring out life.
Yeah.
Try it out. This is what I
Yeah.
want now. And it's okay to not know 20 years from now, but I do like to do, 5 years, 10 years, just to have some guardrails.
Right. As some direction, yeah,
Yeah.
guardrails, as you said. So when you say like, just experiment, try it out, like you're actually tuning into how that feels in your body. Because this is what we do in
Yes.
lioness training. It's not so much cognitive like A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
It's like try this on, see what this feels like, and then see what comes up for you in your own next step. Is that what you mean by like experiment? Try it on.
Yes, I mean, try it on. Trying it on from the point of view of how does this feel? What
Mm,
happens to my energy when I do this? Uh, does my energy go up? Does it stay
yeah.
flat? Or does it drop? And that's such a
Yes.
simple thing to do, like over a week. And that's going to give you, and you can think about it even as like, if you have some direction, but you're making corrections. right? You're
Hmm.
flying across the country. The airplane doesn't fly straight. I mean, it
Yeah.
goes in from New York to San Francisco, but the pilot is always correcting, whether it's
It's
up
course
or down.
correction.
Course correction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just doing
Yeah.
those small things, but actually trying them and not just keeping it up in your head. And that longing, because that longing, when you're trying it out, then you're meeting your ambition. And that's really what I'm wanting, what I'm helping women do is to meet their ambition. It's like there's this thing out here, and how do you get in that direction?
That breaks it down so much easier as you're talking. Like when you say meet your ambitions, like, oh, I've got to do this thing that's out there. But you're not saying, you're saying like just notice how this feels in your body and
Yeah.
follow that. What makes it, what lifts your energy
Yeah.
is meeting your ambition.
Yeah. And something else that might sound a little funky, but I love vision boards.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I think that and when I look at my vision board from 2013, and here we are in 2024, like I, over the last 11 years, I have pretty much done all of those things.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
some are
yeah,
bigger than I thought. And some are not as, did not come through as strong, but that definitely gave me with action, because it's not enough just to make a vision board, sit down with the magazines, and we're talking about how you feel about something. And like when you look at pictures, you get a different a different download than when you read something sometimes. So all different
yes.
ways of kind of doing this. But putting that together of like, what do I want in the next decade? And,
Mm-hmm.
what are the things that are standing in my way? And how do I take responsibility for it?
Yeah. Yeah. I had that same experience. I have a vision board that I looked back at. There's only one of the images of a cave and a steps leading up to a cave that I'm curious if that's in France. So
Oh,
I like those
yeah.
symbols, like how women take in we take in symbols and pictures and images
Mm.
as a guide forward. Um, yeah. So responsibility. Tell me about that, like taking responsibility for this. You had an aha moment yourself where you realized that you needed to step up to your own
Right,
ambition.
right. Yeah. So that aha moment was when I was really kind of in the depths of childcare and my career. I had started out as a reporter and I loved my job, but then we moved, and my career was kind of like stagnant. It was on the down, and my husband's career was on the way up. And so what was happening, I felt resentment. Uh, and one day he came home from a trip, and was unpacking his suitcase, and he just turned to me and he suddenly like ripped off his wedding ring and said, "I can't do this anymore." And it, like, his words were just kind of fell flat for me in a way, because I had already been thinking, and I said to him, "Oh, well, I was thinking of leaving this marriage when Molly graduated from high school." And that was like, but
Wow. Yeah.
when I said that, like, it was first like, wow, I can't believe I said this out loud. But as the words
Yeah.
came out of my mouth, I also realized that I didn't want a divorce. I wanted more. I wanted more. I had just,
Oh,
when I took
yeah.
that
There's so much in
responsibility,
that.
yeah, it
Hmm.
wasn't enough.
Just from you spoke that truth, like that's what in that moment of truth for the two of you, it didn't turn out that way. It like that's how you were feeling. And then tell me what that actually meant when you said that for you, what you
Well,
found out.
so what it meant was that what I realized was I was saying those words that I didn't want a divorce. I was jealous, right? He was getting what I
Mm,
wanted. And I had deadened myself and my own ambition, right?
yeah. And there's so many reasons why we do that, isn't there? Like how we deaden ourselves over time.
Yeah, well, uh, I, yes, so many reasons of like, just like how difficult it can be to do something new when all of the pressure is coming back to be the same and to be to keep doing the same things as you're
Be a
kind of
good mother. Yeah.
programmed
Hmm.
or programmed yourself.
Hmm.
You got to get out of your own way sometimes. I
Hmm.
love
Hmm.
the phrase, nobody's coming to rescue you.
Yes. Yes. Save yourself.
Yeah, and it actually doesn't
Or-
mean that you are the only one, but because when you do this in community, that is super helpful, right? So
Yeah.
I'll just,
Yeah.
like for me, what happened was I took action. I realized, oh, I am doing this. This is what I'm creating. And so I challenged myself to learn. I started following this conscious leadership path that my husband had been taking and learning. And one really big step was that I went across the country and went to a conscious leadership training. And
Mhm.
the first real, and that's actually what I coach is through this model of conscious leadership. And I'll just tell you a little bit about that. In that,
Yeah.
what I think of a conscious leader is someone who takes 100% responsibility for their impact on the world. Now, that means that they need to be self-aware. They need to
Mhm.
know what's going on in themselves, uh, their emotions. They need to know how to manage their thoughts. They need to know what their body is telling them. All of these things, right?
Yeah.
So that you can
Yeah.
take responsibility for really what you're creating and how you're showing up.
Yeah. 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 This is so, I mean, we have so many examples. This is so timely of unconscious leadership in the world.
Yes.
We know and if those are examples of leaders, I'm sure,
Mhm.
women are sitting at home going, I don't want to be one of those. So how do
Yeah.
I move forward? Being a conscious leader is
Yeah.
uh, is really what we need in the world and
Yeah.
for ourselves.
Yeah. So, and I want to make really clear that, I think that one of the ways that we as you're in Canada, I'm in the US, but one of the ways that we hurt ourselves is by an individualistic approach to things. Now, it does start with you, right? As a conscious leader, you need to change yourself, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And if you think like even if any of the listeners resonated with what I just said about having that aha moment about like, oh, I think I wanted this, but really I want something else. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I voiced it and heard myself saying it that I understood it. And when you're in a group, when you're with other people, you can have, one person's aha moment can be an aha moment for someone else. And so that's like the
Yes.
kind of the group leadership, and that's a lot of what I do in my group programs is people
Okay.
learn from
Yeah.
each other. So I just want to say that it is, and lots of things are beyond our control,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we need to learn to manage ourselves for better leadership
Because
and to
it's
know
our
when
place of where we can have
yeah,
some impact right here in
yeah,
ourselves first. Yeah. I love this idea because one of the things we work through in lioness training, we talk about how we've learned that separation, the jealousy and the individual, I have to do this all on my own as women. And when we start to voice that truth, and there's like you start to connect in a more vulnerable way,
Yeah.
like a true connection with the people around you, whoever they might be. And some people you don't, and that's fine. But yeah, connection and knowing and having that support. Um, so conscious leadership, yeah, taking full responsibility for how you are, what you feel, what you're thinking, and your impact. Can
Yeah.
you tell me more about, so you've outlined like three elements that you work with in conscious leadership.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a
So
little more about that? Yeah.
well, so conscious leadership being that, really taking 100% responsibility. But one of the three keys to like knowing that and working with that in these uncertain times, and let's just say like life was uncertain. It's always been uncertain. We just don't know what's going to happen. So building your resilience is a really important thing. And I know that before we started this, you and I breathed together for a few minutes, right? We took a
Mm-hmm.
few breaths together so that we could center ourselves and from whatever was happening, whatever we came, that the energy of just getting up and getting microphones on and all of that stuff so that we could be present and we could be fully
Yes.
present with each other.
Yeah. So
So,
key.
yeah. And so learning, I encourage my clients to have some breathwork practice and to, even if it's just a minute or two a day, and it's like, just start small. Just start
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
And it's something that's always in your power. So
Yes.
um,
Nobody
that's
can,
why,
yeah.
yeah. So those resilience practices, uh, a breath practice, anything that you do that brings you back to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
learning to challenge your thoughts so that you
Mm-hmm.
don't believe everything your mind says.
Yeah. 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 And I love what you just said is finding out what works for you, that nobody has to, follow the recipe of sitting in meditation for an hour. If that's not what makes you feel alive, finding three breaths to ground and
Yeah.
become present.
Yeah. So a couple
Mhm.
summers ago, I learned a new practice that's very similar to meditation, but it was very nature based, and it's called finding a sit spot. So
Okay.
if you and it's a place in nature, and it could be you think of your backyard even. Where's a place that you're going to go where you're going to sit and just
Mhm.
be with nature, be with the trees, be
Mhm.
with the sounds. And there may be other
Mhm.
sounds, if you live in a neighborhood, you're gonna hear the
Mhm.
trash truck. Uh, but just to be, uh, so it's not even thinking about your breath or meditating. It is being with all of the other living beings in the world. And I
Yeah.
found that to be really rejuvenating
Mhm.
because I'm a
Mhm.
very nature-based person. So
Yeah.
I love being with the
So am
trees.
I. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes any kind of pressure out of it. Like we can all just sit and be for a couple of minutes without having to do some specific technique or get to a certain level of peace in our body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was one of the keys, this resilience, this foundation that we need to be able to come back to when we're discombobulated out there,
Yeah.
or, in the midst of a shame spiral. Um, yeah, what are the other keys that you
Yeah.
teach?
So the other keys is as a leader, you should know your leadership style. And I use the Enneagram, which is a personality assessment that helps you understand your ways of thinking, behaving, and being in the world. Like it's 9 ways of seeing the world. And when you see it helps you see your unconscious patterns and what we call your blind spots. So
Right.
you look in the mirror and you see yourself, but you can't see your back. You have to have someone else or turn around. So how do you see as a leader or going through your life, even in relationships, what are your blind spots? And what is your
Yeah.
style? What is your style when you get upset?
Yeah.
Because we have certain patterns of being upset, right? Are you the kind of person are you a perfectionist? Are you the challenger or visionary? So
Okay.
those are all kind of some of the ideals of knowing your style.
And with the Enneagram, so when you kind of get more familiar with how you lead,
Mhm.
it also bring up how like your shadows then, like your
Yes.
blind spots.
Yes.
It's been a long time since I did one. I can't remember what style I am. I'm going to go back and look at that. So it
Yeah.
actually highlights, some things you might not be seeing about yourself unless you were
Yes.
got feedback from other people that
Well,
was
I'll tell you a little
reliable.
story. A little story like this is about not seeing a blind spot. So when I told you about going to California and doing the conscious leadership training. Well, I was in a training with a big group of people, like 50 people, and we were doing something, and I piped up and said, "Hey, I'm kind of a rebel." And everybody in the room laughed. The whole room everybody started laughing because they all knew that about me.
Oh, I
But it was
see.
something I had not seen about myself.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's an example of a blind spot.
Right. Right. So blind spots aren't always like negative. Like they're not like they're unconscious, but they
Yeah.
might be like real strengths or wisdom that you have or character trait. Other people can
Yes.
see like it's so obvious,
It
but that you
was so
can't see.
obvious to everyone else, but not to me. And so let's
Right.
think about
Yeah.
that though. You talk about, is it a positive or it's not necessarily negative, but actually, I didn't know. If you think of a rebel as someone who's always pushing back and,
Mm, mm,
poking things and not being a nonconformist or whatever. Well, if you don't know you're doing that, you can get yourself in
hmm
trouble, right?
Right. You're gonna poke a bear or the wrong. You're gonna keep poking the wrong place.
Yeah, you're going to keep poking the wrong place, and other people are going to see it and they're going to react to you in certain ways, but you don't see it. So you're getting this reaction like, oh, well, what am I doing? Well,
Yeah.
you're not following the rules. Or,
hmm
but if you're not aware of it, that's what gets you
Yeah.
in trouble. Some people
That
who are
reminds.
people pleasers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they can't see it because sometimes and until they because they feel often for a lot of the women I work with who are they're sensitive, they're empaths, and they run into these patterns of people pleasing until they're burnt out or
Yeah.
they're just anxious, but they have this vision that that's how they are supposed to be,
Right.
like and when we take that loving part of themselves and flip it around, it looks very different
Hmm.
than people pleasing with people who don't appreciate them,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
yeah, so you can take those parts of yourself that you may not even be conscious of. This is why I love the words that you use, like conscious leadership. And you might have been like a poker, like a rebel, but oh, I'm a rebel, yes I am, and step into it with that full responsibility.
Well, and also know, because so you have as your consciousness as a leader grows and you know, this is kind of my habitual way of doing things. Oh yeah, I'm the one who pokes, right? We all know that. Uh, but then when you learn to be resilient and also to manage yourself through breath and to create that pause, so something happens, you have your habitual way of responding to it, but then you learn to take a breath, take, shift yourself, and then to choose, oh, does this rebel need to be in the room?
Yeah.
Because this might not be the best time. And that's how, as a conscious leader, you get to expand your range.
Yeah. That's where the magic happens in that moment, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you get to choose. And if you are just if you are just bumbling around and not paying any attention and really unconscious about your behaviors, then you
Hmm.
don't get to choose. There's no
Yeah.
choice there. And it works for a while. And I would say that many of the women that who I work with, they're like, well, this is what they hired me for. This is like, I remember someone telling me that, like, she was a go-getter and she just, did worked and worked and worked. And I said, oh yeah, you can work hard and you can get stuff done. And are you feeling burned out? She's like, well, yeah. So
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
that's a sign.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like repatterning to something else to expand like your choices. And this is something that we do in lioness training is like noticing that moment where it comes up in your body and you want to move forward to, yeah, that pattern is to people please, to say yes when you really want to say no, and
Mhm.
to just actually stay with that, like it's almost like a freeze moment in your body, and just breathe there and
Yeah.
just stay there even for a moment longer, like the pause. And maybe you'll go back and do the old pattern, but maybe one day or today you'll actually move in a different direction. And it's that moment where things shift.
Yeah. And that is, if you're talking about meeting your ambition, about moving towards something that you don't really know what it is, but you know that's the direction that you're going, you need to keep making those new choices. And
Mhm. To show
some
up
of those
differently.
old skills are going to be helpful to you, but you just learn to just more finesse, right? More
Hmm.
finesse. And it takes
Yeah, don't throw
practice.
the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it takes a
yeah,
lot of
just
practice though.
refine finesse. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So just if we can just go over like some of those tools, like the resilience, that conscious choice. And was there something else, another tool that you teach in these three key elements of conscious leadership?
Yeah. So what the other element that I teach in the conscious leadership is, so you have resilience, you have knowing your leadership style, and there
Style. Yeah.
actually is more than one, but I'll tell you about uh, knowing how you get reactive, because we all get reactive and we have a special sauce for that, right? We all have a special sauce. And that's actually one of the things that I teach my clients first so that they can put it on a sticky note right next to their desk or where they're working. And that is, if you think of what is your recipe for getting reactive, when something doesn't go your way, what do you hear yourself saying? Right? Are you saying, the can't or the should or I'm right or you're wrong? What do you hear yourself saying? And then what
Hmm.
do you have to believe? Do you have to believe that there's something out there that's going to get you? Do you need to be in control? Maybe there are only two
Yeah.
options. Um, and
Yes.
then what happens? What do you do? Do you argue? Do you blame people? Maybe you have that freeze or fight.
Yeah. Hmm.
And that is really when you get that's a way of developing self-awareness so that you know that when you hear yourself say one of those things, I can't or they should. My personal one is the truth is when I hear myself say the truth is, or when anyone else in my family hears that now, because we've trained each other, then we know, oh, actually, Meg is below the line. She's gone unconscious. She's getting reactive.
I like how you just said that you involve your family in that too, because we all go below the line, and if other people are also aware of when you go below the line, then you've got some
Yeah,
other safeguards in place. But having that one thing that alerts you, okay, I'm in reactivity right now, and this is perhaps not the truth.
yeah, not the truth, or it's um, I'm not thinking clearly, or I'm not curious. I'm not open. I'm
Yeah,
feeling
yeah.
defensive. That's basically how do you get defensive? You know, when you're going like this, somebody gives you some feedback. You're at work and somebody gives you feedback, and you're like, don't want to hear that. Talk to the hand.
Yeah, yeah, that backward moving. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so bringing those patterns to consciousness. So being
Yes.
consciously aware as a leader, because you're going to run up against all kinds of things when you start moving towards your dream and what you want. You're going to get
Mhm.
feedback, you're going to get comments, especially if you're launching onto social media.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
going to happen. You can't avoid it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is like its a whole nother beast. Uh, I think,
Mhm.
launching onto social media, and for me, that has been very difficult. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that the idea of, and this is not true for everyone, it's true for me. I don't know if it's true for you, but the idea of being seen has been terrifying to me. And it's
Terrifying.
not that way
Mhm.
anymore because I've done so many things, so much trained myself and practiced. We talked about like before we got on here, like how much you have to just practice this, showing up. And that's
Mhm.
no matter what kind of job you have or what your next project is, you got to show up.
Mhm.
And sometimes
Mhm.
that's on social media just because of it's the nature of how people uh, find other people these days.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like in order to have an impact and be the leader that you want to be, you have to show up so people can find you. And
Yeah.
some people will not resonate with you. And when I
Yeah.
started initially talking about lioness training, I just had to keep going until the people that it resonated with started coming forward. And there's
Yeah.
that gap of this sounds crazy, or I look like, I look stupid. I like all those old things that come up around showing up and being who you are when maybe you haven't been allowed to be who you were. You deadened part of
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's haven't been allowed to be who you are. I think that resonates with me. And it's another place where it's like you have to take responsibility. Am I going to let other people define me? I've let it happen all of these years. Like, when are we done with this? Right? When are we going to be done
Yeah.
with this? And when are we just going to go and step up? But it takes practice. It takes even listening to yourself speak. I to become and that like as I'm sitting here now, I feel in my body totally calm. I don't feel anxious. And that has not always been the case. And even just a few years ago, I would do podcasts, I would show up, but I was just felt terror.
Yeah.
Um, And I did a lot of things. I did improv classes. I would say that I went to improv class like every Saturday morning for about 2 years. And that helped me so much just in this friendly environment to stand up and be seen. And where improv is about, it's improvisational comedy. It's basically you take what is happening in the moment and do something with it. It's the yes and yes and is a very good skill to learn in life. And it's also super helpful to, because it's about failing. The whole thing is about failing and getting practice failing.
Mhm.
So I attribute a lot of my good feelings to like, oh yeah, I practiced. I practiced
Yeah.
failing.
I took improv as well, and it was one of the best things that I did for that building that muscle of being spontaneous, being silly, you allowing yourself to just like loosen that grip a little bit, like the tightness in the throat, and just
Yeah.
go with it in a
Yeah.
safe
And there's
environment.
silly games, right? There's
Mhm.
silly games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be all perfect and streamlined and a speech. Yeah, yeah. Because if we were trying to do this interview perfectly, we would have like failed in the first minute because it just
Yeah.
evolves
Yeah. It has
and it's
evolved.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No notes here. And in my personality type, I over prepare.
Mm.
So I have a brand of perfectionism, and my perfectionism comes from not needing things to be perfect, but necessarily for the perfection of the thing, but so that people like don't get mad at me.
Uh-huh.
It's
That's
it's
like an old
more,
program.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of women, a lot of, our listeners are going to be able to relate to that, that I can't get it wrong. I don't want to do something wrong because,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a terrible feeling. And then to realize that, oh, stepping into that responsibility as a grown up, like I can do this. And it's the journey and the experiment that matters.
Yeah. And I think it also is a shift in um, I'd like to think of it as public learning. Like right now, you and I are doing public learning. So
Mhm.
we're talking, we might make a mistake. We might even say something that's like, oh, really? Did I mean that?
Yeah.
And other
Oh no,
people are
I've never
listening.
done that. No,
Yeah,
just
that's
kidding.
right. Other people are listening to us.
Yeah.
But we're learning here and being together publicly. And other people are getting their ahas. They're getting
Mhm.
their, whatever it is that they're going to take away from this. And that's out of our control.
Yes, yes. I love that public learning and letting go, like taking full responsibility for how you're going about your life and letting go of the responsibility of how other people, you can love other people, but for how they feel or how they react or what they get, what they don't get is beyond
Yeah.
your control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can think of yourself, so you can think of yourself as walking context. So when you have done, your inner work, when you're doing your inner work, uh, and you are organizing yourself as a conscious leader, as someone who is aware of their impact on the world, and that your context, and the context is not the what you're doing, it's the how you're doing it. Your context comes with you into the room. And it's my experience with everyone all the women I've coached and myself, is that when they start doing their inner work and they walk into the room, they're walking whatever room it is, whether it's their family or whether it's their work. When they walk in, it is different. It's different for them because they're different, because they have done, they're more aware of themselves. And so they bring something different even if it's the same content,
Yeah.
even if they're saying the same things, they bring it differently. They bring it as a better listener.
When you show up differently, it's like when you change, the things around you change, and the
Yeah,
people, your life around you change. It changes
yeah,
because of that inner work. That's
yeah,
beautiful. Meg, I want to know more about what you're up to now. How can people get a hold of you? What's coming up?
yeah. So uh, I have some exciting things coming up. I'm actually really enjoying doing podcasts. So, search for me on podcasts because I talk about all kinds of different things in conscious leadership. And I I do one-to-one coaching. I also work with leaders and teams. Often that comes from working with a leader first and then working with the team. Um, and I also have a program coming up in January 2025, and it's a 9-month program, and it is really to take women leaders because it's all women. I really I have decided that that's what I really want to connect with women and teach women. So that's the group that I'm working with and is conscious leadership skills. It's a transformational program. And when you'll have that different context when you leave the program 9 months later. So you will be different. You will be transformed. So
Transformed.
and you can find me at my website, megdennison.com. Also my
Okay.
Substack. We can put this in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll link to everything. And yeah, for the listener as well, all the links are below, so they'll find them there. Yeah, you can find them
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So a 9-month journey, it's like a rebirth, isn't it?
Well,
Just in
I
case.
hadn't thought about it that way. It was, it's more like a rebirth, I guess. But it is for people to learn in all the ways that I found so transformative. So that learning in a group, so that you have your ahas from other people, you learn the content, but you also change. You also learn from other people. Access
Mhm.
to me as a coach and learning from other people. It's going to be fun.
Fun is good. Fun is a great way to learn.
Yeah,
Not all of us had fun in school learning, so this is adult learning. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I really love that. Like bringing in these keys of consciousness, of awareness, of resilience, starting, with the inner work as to who you are and how it has to start there. And
yeah,
how you are, how you are, and then expanding, being able to expand from there as a leader and having impact. You'll have impact in yourself, which will impact your life, which will move you towards what you want, towards your dreams that
yeah,
maybe you have put up on your vision board. It's something coming from inside there.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah. So before we, wrap up today, is there anything else that you would like to add or anything that we haven't touched upon that still feels like it's waiting to be heard here for our women that are
Well,
listening?
actually, there is one thing, because one of the things that, when we're talking about how you get defensive and um, when you get feedback from someone or something, the world's giving you feedback. A lot of times the temptation is to say, no, that's not true, or yes, that's true. And there's nothing in between. So I have found this, and this is a tip that you can take away and you can start using like right now. When someone gives you feedback, whether it's, in your one-to-one or, just on the street, ask yourself, not is this true, but how is this true? And when you ask yourself, how is this true? Kindly, curiously, you shift into learning. You shift from defensiveness, this is or this isn't, into learning. And it's so simple, and it can just really change how you feel about, what's coming up in your day.
Yeah. I can feel that just a slight, like an opening. There's an opening there. If somebody makes a comment or gives you some, negative feedback or feedback about yourself that doesn't like, that makes you feel that defensiveness,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've all been everything. So if somebody
Mhm.
calls you like a bitch or something like that, like, I mean, it sounds like initially like that's really insulting, and it's not that you're saying yes, I am, but it's like, oh, I can be that sometimes. I can't,
Yeah.
that is me sometimes.
Well, and it also, I mean, I think that's actually like opens up a bigger can of worms, just that
Mm.
word, for me anyway. But I think that it's more like, yeah, okay. So for that person, that the behavior that I just did is has an edge to it for them. And yeah, so how is it true? Yeah, actually, I'm not putting up with that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rather than just the instant pushing away
Yeah,
or collapsing into it. Yeah,
yeah,
that middle way.
yeah,
So beautiful, just
yeah.
opening up that little glimmer, that curiosity
Yeah,
into
that
learning.
curiosity. And so that really you can meet if you have this unmet ambition, you have this longing, this yearning, that you can use all of this feedback for your growth.
Mhm. For me, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, my
yeah,
own expansion. Yeah,
yeah.
it's beautiful. Well, Meg, thank you so much for being here. And it's just been, I just love these conversations that just light up different ideas and, incept, um, different ideas in my body and in my heart, and lead, the path, maybe another step on the way towards our own expansion, becoming our leaders of our own lives in our own bodies
Yeah.
in an authentic way that works for us
Yes.
moving forward. And
Yeah.
I'll post all the links below. So if you're listening and you want to get a hold of Meg, you're curious about the 9-month program, which I'm very curious about, be sure to contact Meg, reach out and, Google her, watch some of the other podcasts, and become the conscious leader of your own life.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madeline. This was amazing. Thank you.